So here is a quick introduction to the Sound Devices 633 mixer recorder. We're going to go through the different panels that we have here, and then we'll get into actually turning it on and formatting our media, naming our files, and getting up and running with making a simple recording. So let's start here with the front. On the front panel, we've got our power on and off controls. We've got a couple of buttons here. There's menu. There's a headphone encoder knob here, and this is how you will change the volume of your headphones. You'll also notice there's some quick little shortcuts that they put on here, so you can directly get into your media by pressing the menu button and the headphone encoder in at the same time. You got some toggle switches here for your headphone feeds. You've got return there. You can quickly listen to your return. And you've also got a quick toggle switch for the built-in slate microphone on here and to generate tone. There's some other selectors here, one for selecting tracks, the other for changing the way your meters look. And just like the other side, if you press these two buttons at the same time, it will arm or disarm certain tracks. We've got our transport control right up here. So if you press this toggle up, it will start recording. You press it down, it stops recording. Down that way, you will get playback, and then fast forward and rewind. So now we get over to the meaty section of this. We've got a couple of different controls here. Let me just pop these down to show you how that works. We have 3 channels accessible right here, and then 4, 5, and 6. There are 6 respective inputs on this recorder, and you have control over them. 1, 2, and 3 are bigger because they have preamps for them. 4, 5, and 6 only accept line level inputs. So let's take a look at our controls here, and we have the most controls for channels 1 through 3. These silver knobs here are our gain or trim gain. And we can push them in and then pop up, and they give us access to them. That way you can sort of set your level and then get it out of the way so you don't accidentally bump knobs in the dark. So turn it one way, and we'll get more gain for channel 1. This one's for channel 2, this one's for channel 3. And then we actually have pan control up here. These work the same way as the silver buttons. You push them in, and then they pop out, and then we have sets here where I can pan channel 1 all the way to the right or all the way to the left. And there's a nice little detent there for the center position. You shouldn't have to use that too much for multi-track recording for film. These large potentiometers or knobs here are faders for channels 1, 2, and 3. And what those do is once you've already set the level, so you've already set your level for channel 1 and you've seen it in your meter here, these determine how much goes to the mix track. If you're sending outputs to something, or just recording the mix track for playback purposes, screening dailies, sending it to directors through a Comtech feed, or sending it through a camera wireless hop. You'll notice there's some markings here. 0 is unity gain, so that means you're just sending the track to the mix track as is, and you can go up or down. Just remember that order. This silver controls the gain for your channel, and this is just a fader. So this doesn't affect your ISO channel that you may be recording. Let's talk quickly about this left-hand side. Here's where all your inputs are. You have inputs 1, 2, and 3. For microphones, your boom will normally go right here in channel 1, and then you can power that with power through here. These are normal XLR inputs. Down here for channels 4, 5, and 6, we have these TA3 inputs, and these only take line level signals. And the way that works is, or the idea here is that you have 3 preamps that you can use for microphones that may require power, and then 3 line level signals, because this recorder is set up for a traditional film setup for doing sound for film, production, TV, what have you. And you really won't need more than one microphone that needs power. The rest of these, the idea is that these would all be wireless receivers, which should output a line level signal. You got a little output here as well, X3 and X4. You can independently inside the mixer route things to that. A little compartment here for AA batteries, if you want to use that as a backup power source. And this right-hand panel has pretty much all our outputs. So if you want to think of it this way, stuff comes in on the left, goes through here, and then comes out on the right. We've got our XLR outputs, so left and right. These are tied directly to your mix track, so mix left and mix right. You've got a headphone input to plug in your headphones. It's connected to the headphone amp. There's a return. This is an input. That's for your return feed coming back from a camera, or perhaps another feed that you want to bring into this mixer. You've got a 4-pin Hiroshi input here for our DC power if we're running off of either house power or our batteries. And a timecode output here. So we can actually use a little timecode cable to jam cameras or jam lock boxes on those cameras, or jam the timecode slate. Before I forget, you'll see a USB input here. I think it's a USB Type 2, USB Type 2, I think if it's Type 2. I'll have to double check that. And then there's this door here that opens up. It's magnetically shut, so you need to give it a little bit of a pop, and then it pops right open. And we've got spots for our media here. So this will take one SD card and one compact flash card if you have them. And it will record to both at the same time. And you can actually set it to record different formats on both. So you can have one recording all your media for the day, and then one just recording a mix track MP3 if you wanted. Or one could be recording MP3s and the other can be recording your normal WAV files. I just like to leave it as both record the exact same thing, and then one acts as a backup source for me in case one card fails, or in case I take a card out, like this, go and give it to the DIT for the day, and they happen to accidentally erase my card or something silly like that. Chances are that'll never happen, but it's nice to have the compact flash card in there as a backup just in case something like that happens. So this mixer recorder has a couple of different powering options. One is right here, and this is probably the most reliable, robust power source that you can give this, will be the 10 to 18 volts direct current through either a wall adapter or a battery system that you're using for your bag, normally with NP1 style batteries. On the bottom of the mixer recorder here, we actually have two spots for Sony NPF style batteries that'll go in there and can also power the mixer recorder. And then as sort of a last resort emergency backup, we have a compartment for 6 AA batteries in here. Now, I recommend either running this off of your NP1 style batteries or the Sony NPF style batteries. The AA batteries will not run the mixer recorder for very long, especially if you're providing phantom power to microphones. Where this does come in as a nice feature is if it's more expensive to have the NPF style batteries and the NP1 style batteries. So if you're running this off NP1 style batteries, I find it nice insurance to have those 6 AA's in here, just in case you're not paying too much attention and your NP1 style battery runs out of power during a take or something silly like that. This recorder mixer will actually just switch right over to the AA power. And what that'll do is that'll let you finish the take and then go and change your battery. There's a couple of robust options here where if you had this plugged into all different sources of power, it would just immediately switch over to the next one available without powering down. So let's go up how to set up our batteries, because we've got an NP1 style battery with a battery distribution system here that you'll see at Feirstein that you'll have to set this up with. Move that mixer to the side, and let's bring in our battery stuff. So inside the Orca bag that contains your mixer and your sound kit that you should be able to take out from the equipment room, you'll have one of these. It's your battery distribution system. You should have two of these NP1 style batteries, and there'll also be a respective charger and OSHA power cable for that, so make sure that's there, or else you'll be leaving the equipment room with just two batteries, which will last you a day, but not too much more than a day. And then here we have our battery cup for our battery to go into, and this connects to our battery distribution system. Last but not least, you have our cable that goes from our battery distribution system to this 4-pin Feirstein output, and that connects directly to your mixer. Now, why would I have all this junk for just powering my mixer? So when a professional sound mixer puts together a bag for their kit, a lot of times there's multiple things that you want to power off of one battery. That makes things very self-contained and easy, where you just have one battery to change and you don't have a bunch of different batteries to change. So normally the things that would be powered off this in addition to your mixer could be wireless transmitter units and wireless receiver units, mainly wireless receiver units that you would have that'd be being powered off of your one MP1 style battery. There's a couple of other things that you could power to, but it would mainly be that. That way you run everything in the bag off one battery, and it makes life a little bit easier and it simplifies things. So let's go through hooking this up. So this battery cup here, this connects to our battery distribution system right down here where it says input. And we'll plug that in. We got to line up the pins, and it snaps in like that. And there's a couple of controls on here. There's this U and then S, and then LA, NI, and LI. So if you look on the side here, all this little switch here is this switch at the top here. It will glow, and it glows green when your batteries are full, and it starts to glow orange and then red when they are low in power and empty. So respectively here, La stands for lead acid, Ni stands for nickel metal hydride, and Li stands for lithium ion, which is the type of battery that we're using. Most of the types of batteries, these NP1 style batteries, are lithium ion. So we hook that up, and this can go anywhere. There's this U and S here that's important to notice, and that stands for unswitched or switched. And that just connects to this one in output right here. So you can make it switched or unswitched, meaning even if you turn this switch here off, if it's unswitched, it'll still continue sending power. That could be useful for a couple of different scenarios. Let's say you never want to actually have this switch power off your mixer. You plug your mixer in here and then have that connected unswitched here. That way, even if you hit this, it's still going to send power to your mixer. So what the heck? We'll plug this in here. This plugs in like so, and then there's actually a locking collar here that screws down. So you'll screw that down. And then you've got this setup. This battery goes into this battery cup here, like so. You'll line up the contacts with here, and it just fits in there. There's nothing that holds it in there or locks it in. It just fits snugly in there. Now let me move all this aside, and we'll bring back our mixer. You can hear me smacking a bunch of stuff around on my desk. We've got our input here, our 4-pin Feirstein input, and you'll notice that this connector, there's a bunch of little notches in here, and then those notches line up with, or those grooves line up with these notches here. And you'll have to line this up and press it in gently. So I like to take a look at it and then figure out where it's going to be in here and line it up and click it in. Now, the way I did that just now, I'll show that again to you, because these sometimes are a little tricky. A lot of times they'll have now you can just barely see it here on this. On this LEMO connector for the timecode, there's just a little hint of red there. And that's where you would line up a corresponding red mark on your LEMO connector, and it'd make it easy to plug in. With this Feirstein input, you don't really have a little mark, but you do have these notches and grooves to line up. And what I'll do is I'll try to line them up, but a lot of times you won't get it perfect when you turn it over here like this. So you get it close, and then I just rotate it very gently while applying a tiny bit of pressure. You don't want to jam it in. You will break this if you jam that in. But a gentle touch will make it seat in nicely, and it should just slide in nicely. Now this is a locking connector, so it won't come out if I tug on here. So be careful of that. If you do tug on here, what's going to happen is you're just going to ruin this cable. There's a locking collar up here, and what you do is you pull back this collar, like so, and then your Feirstein cable will pop out. All right, so I changed our camera angle just a little bit here so you guys can get a better look at this front LCD screen, because we're about to do some messing around with this. So you've already set up the power distribution to your 633 mixer recorder, and you're ready to go and ready to power it on. So let's power that on real quick. We're going to press our on switch, turn that on, and this will power up. Now, I just powered it up after powering it down. It has what's called quick boot in here, and it'll power up in 2 seconds. I'm going to hold down this menu button for 7 seconds, and this little timecode light should stop flashing. There we go. So that force powered down the mixer recorder. It has a little watch battery inside it, and some redundant circuitry that'll keep a little bit of power in it. In the case of total power failure, if your battery becomes unplugged, it will hold a charge for about 10 seconds while it powers itself down so that you don't lose a recording. So let's power this up again. You're going to see the full power up cycle where it goes through this, and it takes more than 2 seconds. It tells you sound devices, the firmware version, and then we're going to be up and running. Still pretty fast, faster than most cameras out there. So let's take a quick look at this. Actually, let me demonstrate that power off to you real quick. So if our Feirstein cable here gets unplugged for some reason, this is actually going to stay on for a little bit before it tells me that it needs to power down, and then it takes time to power down. And if you can give it power in that time, it will stay powered on. So let's power this on again and power on. So at this point, you should have power hooked up to your recorder, and you should have media inserted into it. In this case, we have an SD card here. You really should only use higher-end SD cards. There is a recommended media list or approved media list in the menu here and on Sound Device's website. Normally, the top-of-the-line SanDisk cards are the way to go. In fact, I would even go higher than this for their reliable ones and get one of these. They're relatively cheap these days. They're Extreme Pro. That's like the highest that they offer. It's got the little black label instead of the gold one. Just go buy these. This is a pretty big one too. It comes in 64 gigabytes and 170 megabits per second, which is super fast, and that's a lot of data. They used to sell them at 95 megabits per second and 32 gigabytes, but they don't sell that anymore. That's discontinued. This is the current version of it, and it's pretty cheap compared to what it was a year ago. A year ago, or even a year and a half ago, this would have cost you $60 easily. Now it should cost you somewhere around 20 or even under 20. So let's put that in here. And the first thing we're going to want to do when we put new media into our recorder is format it. This cannot write to new media if you don't format it. In the case that it does, you could cause an issue that will corrupt your files that you're trying to record, or even freeze up the mixer. A couple of people have had some issues recently with these freezing up, and I suspect that it's due to faulty media. I was able to recreate that error by myself over the weekend, and I suspect faulty media to be the reason for that. So the first thing you'll want to do is format your media. You can do this a couple of different ways. You can come into the menu, go into File Storage, and scroll all the way to the bottom and erase Format SD card. And you'll press this encoder knob inwards for that to happen. Or my way of getting in here is I like to press the menu and headphone encoder at the same time. And this gives you a shortcut right to your take list and everything. And then you can press this toggle switch to get into files, or you can press this toggle switch to edit your next take, what you're going to call it. Menu goes back, I press this, and it'll tell you what you have in there for a card, and I like being able to see this. So what I want to do is click Option, and then Erase Format. It's going to ask you multiple times if you're okay with this. So it's going to ask me once. It's going to ask me twice. And then it's going to format the SD card and tell me that it formatted it successfully. So now our SD card is formatted and ready to go. Let's press Menu and get out of here. From this point, you should probably name the folder that you're putting everything in. Organization is sort of key. Post-production will love you for it. So I'd come into here, press Menu, go to File Storage. And take a look at folder options. Sorry, you just caught me having a brain fart there. And you've got a couple of different options here. There's got all sorts of options where you can have 3 layers of folders. One can be off dailies, and you can even have scenes and takes in separate folders. I like to just toss everything in one folder. I think that makes file management a little bit easier, because you already should be naming your takes as scene and take, whatever they were slated as. So let's just make one big root folder for all our recordings to go into. So we'll add new entry, and then we can select something here. I'll just put the date, and let's say the school. So FGSC _ and I select these numbers and letters by moving the headphone encoder knob and clicking it inwards. The year is 2020. The date is February 24th. I do the year and date in that format because if this were going into a computer database system, it's easier for the computer to read the year first. That way you get things appearing in chronological order. If you do the traditional American month, day, year, what's going to happen is you're going to have everything by month, but you'll have something from 2020 appearing right next to something from 2018, and it's not always nice to have to deal with it that way. And once you're done with this, you will press OK to name that folder. So we named our folder that everything's going to go into. And then we can go to Menu, File Storage, Take List, and we can name our takes. I find it's just easier to get to this take list by pressing these 2 buttons here. And it sounds like we're dealing with some sort of compressor or something outside. Oh, it stopped. Awesome. So I'll press these 2. We'll go into take, and we might want to name our first take Test, because I think it's always good to do a test recording first. So I'll edit this, and scene, I can add new, and we'll just say test. So it'll be test 1, take 1, and from here you can also name all of your tracks because we've got a multi-track recorder. And I find it's nice to be able to do that. So I'm going to name my track 1. So once we've formatted our SD card, I find that it's nice to check a couple of settings on here. So what you'll want to do is go to Recorder, and make sure that you're recording to your SD card. You want to choose Wave Poly, and then make sure our sample rate is set to 48 kilohertz over 24 bits. We could also give ourselves a pre-roll time, which is nice to have. There's some options in here. Wave poly, what that'll do is that'll stick all your tracks that you record on here into one file. If you choose wave poly isos only, it won't give you the mix track. If you choose wave poly left right only, it'll only give you the mix track. If you do wave mono, what's going to happen is it'll give you every track that you record, but in a different file, and that's kind of a pain in the butt to deal with. So wave poly is the easiest and most accepted. And then sample rate 48 kilohertz over 24 bits. Pre-roll is great. You can set this to 0. I just set it to 6, because what's going to happen there is when you press record, it'll record actually 6 seconds before you press the record button. There's a RAM buffer inside here that's constantly listening. So let's go back out of here. And another way to do this, once you've checked that, is you can also just go to quick setup and load settings, TD633, or factory default. I've built in a preset into this recorder and a couple of other, and pretty much all the ones at Feirstein as well, that I think works nicely. And it'll make sure that everything is set to that already, as well as a couple of other nice things. So you've got your channels up here. Normally channel 1 is boom, and then the other ones kind of vary a little bit. Let me change the brightness on this real quick. Can do that in here. So you guys can see this better on the camera. There we go. So here's our tracks here. And right here, this selector switch lets us actually select different, try to keep it focusing on there. It lets us select different tracks in our track count here. Mix left and right, that's your mix track. 1, 2, 3, those are your inputs, 1, 2, and 3. And we can actually arm or disarm these tracks depending on what we want to do. So if I press both these buttons at the same time, it'll disarm that track or arm it. If it's red, it's armed and it's being recorded. You can also turn these channels individually on or off at the channel itself. So if I turn the gain for channel 2 all the way to the left and then push it past its little detent, you'll hear it click, which turns off channel 2. Same for channel 3. Click, turns off channel 3. Channels 4, 5, and 6 down here will work the same way. All of these will pop on and off depending on what I do with these faders. Again, these are just faders for channels 4, 5, and 6 as its line level input. So let's get up and running with just one channel. So we've got boom. We have a different microphone right now. I've got my SM57 over here, which is a dynamic microphone. We're going to plug this into channel 1 right here. I'll move this back here. And I'm going to plug my microphone in. So we plugged our microphone in. It's good to have your headphones plugged in at this point as well. They could plug in. They'll need a 1/4 inch adapter. So if your bag does not come with one, you're sort of out of luck. So be sure to look for that. They'll plug into our headphone input right here. We've got headphone volume control through our headphone encoder here. I'd leave it pretty low to begin with. So we've got these toggle switches up here that say PFL. And there's 1, 4, 2, 5, and 3, 6. So if I push the toggle switch towards the 1, it'll give me the PFL for channel 1. If I push it towards the 4, it'll give it to me for channel 4. Now PFL stands for pre-fader listen. So it'll let you listen to the track pre-fader. In addition to that, what's going to happen is you're going to get all your controls for channel 1. So I've got a list here of input type. I can either have the channel off, I can choose mic with phantom power, or line level. and then a couple of other options here. We've got a high pass filter here. If I choose that, it'll let me use a high pass filter starting at 80 Hertz and going up. What a high pass filter does is it gets rid of some low end rumble that may be present from your boom. I would leave it off for now until you're confident using it and you know what that is. And we've also got some other routing options here. So we can route this channel to X1 or X2. And then we can also route it to the left-right mix. Check here. If for some reason you have the fader turned up and you're not sending anything to your mix track and your microphone's working and you know you can see levels, check here, because if that's not red, this will not send your channel to the mix track. I'm going to press menu again and get out of here. Now, we are using a dynamic microphone right now because this recorder is actually a little busted and its preamps do not provide 48 volts of phantom power, so I can't use it with a traditional shotgun microphone. I guess I'm going to have to make another video talking about that. So to do that, you would plug in your microphone, and once your microphone is plugged in and connected, then you would go here and you would turn on mic phantom power. But right now we're just going to leave it at mic level because we're using this dynamic microphone here. So I'm going to start talking to this microphone, and I'm slowly going to bring up this gain level here until I see my meters bouncing around where I want them to be. So you've got a couple of different things going on meter-wise here. So this channel 1 boom, right now it's not a boom, it's a handheld, but we'll leave it at boom for now. What that indicates is our level for just that one input. And you'll see a VU meter bouncing around here, in addition to a peak hold. So the peak hold, that little line that's left there that stays there for a few seconds and then drops. What that is that tells you the highest peak that your recording went. And for most things, you want to stick right around the 0. You want that peak to be averaging right about that 0. It can go a little over like I'm going right now. So as my voice gets a little quieter, it stays under, and then when I get a little louder, it goes over. What you don't want is for it to go too far past this 8 here. When that little peak line starts going past there, then you start running into some problems, and you get really close to distorting. But gain staging wise with digital audio, that -20 on the peak level, or because this is a dB analog scale meter, 0, but the 0 sort of equals -20. And then 20 equals what would be 0 on a peak meter. So that 0 is your target for the most part. And you can go a little bit above it. And you notice if I go too loud, that starts to turn red up there. And then you'll actually get a little yellow light here for the limiter kicking in and trying to prevent the signal from clipping and distorting. So we already set our gain here. And then these large black knobs, or potentiometers, are our faders, and they control how much of the track goes to this mix track, so stereo left and right. More often than not, that's what you're hearing in your headphones. See how our headphone symbol here says LR stereo? So if I turn this fader all the way down, what'll happen is I'll cease to hear my voice in my headphones. I'll see my meter going here, but I won't see anything in the mix track. Now, if I were to press record right now, what's going to happen is it's going to record all 3 of these tracks. It'll record mix left and right and my 1 track for boom. But what's going to happen is nothing will actually be on the mix left and right. We won't hear anything because I'm not sending any signal to it right now. We'll only get stuff on this ISO track. If I want something in my mix track, I'll turn this up and I can add a little bit to it, or I can keep it at unity gain so that it's, for the most part, the same as my ISO track. Now, when we're ready to record, and I always recommend doing a test record at the beginning of every session, we can press up on this encoder here, and up is record. So I press it up, and it starts recording, and I would do, hey, this is a test recording, I'm Travis, yada, yada, yada. Sometimes it's nice to say hi to the editor, I guess. But what this is for is this is mainly for you to test your recording and playback. So I'll press stop. It'll stop recording. Notice how when it was recording, this lit up red, and when I stopped recording, that stops. And now I'm going to want to listen to this on playback. So I can listen to it by pressing down on this arrow. And it's going to play back my recording. It's green when it's doing playback. I can press stop, or I could fast forward and rewind as well. So that's a basic introduction for getting up and running with this 633 mixer recorder. That should be enough. If you can get it up and running and press record, chances are you're going to get a pretty decent recording as long as you get that microphone in the right place and you get the levels right. One point of confusion for a lot of people is the separation between your channel gain and your fader. So just remember that these small knobs for channels 1, 2, and 3 are actually how you adjust the gain for that one channel in your microphone. The faders really won't adjust that at all. So keep that in mind. And if you put this at unity gain, for the most part, you should be fine. As I wait for a siren to go by. Well, I guess that's my cue to finish the video, so we'll end there.